All right, so today we're diving deep into tsunamis. You sent in a really interesting mix of stuff, a detailed PDF called Understanding Tsunamis, plus a whole bunch of articles and research. So it's clear you want to go beyond just what is a tsunami. You want the history, the science, what's being done about them today.
Yeah, it's a topic that really grabs you, isn't it? This incredible force of nature, capable of traveling across entire oceans at the speed of a jet plane.
Exactly. And we're not talking just ripples here. These waves can rear up, taller than a 10-story building when they hit the shore. So,
That's a great analogy. And because water is so dense, that energy transfer is incredibly powerful. We're talking waves that can travel up to 800 kilometers per hour. Think about that. They can cross entire oceans in just a few hours.
which is why those warning systems we hear about are so crucial. But even with warnings, the sheer scale of these events, it's hard to grasp. Your sources include some pretty chilling historical accounts. Do you want to walk us through a couple of those just to set the stage for how powerful tsunamis can be?
Absolutely. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami, it's seared into our collective memory, a 9.1 magnitude earthquake off the coast of Sumatra, triggered waves that hit 14 countries. The death toll was staggering, somewhere between 230,000 and 280,000 people. It's considered one of the deadliest natural disasters ever recorded.
It's almost hard to wrap your head around numbers that big. And that wasn't the only devastating tsunami, right?
Sadly, no. The 1755 Lisbon tsunami, triggered by an earthquake, killed around 60,000 people and essentially leveled the city. And more recently, in 2011, the Tohoku tsunami in Japan was another stark reminder of nature's power.
The one caused by that massive 9.0 earthquake, right?
Yes, over 18,000 lives lost,
Yeah.
and an estimated $235 billion in damages. The Tohoku tsunami really drove home the need for improved infrastructure and preparedness, even in highly developed nations.
It makes you wonder, where are the most vulnerable places in the world right now? Is it just a case of being near the coast, or are there specific regions that are particularly at risk?
Well, if we look at the big picture, the Pacific Ring of Fire immediately jumps out. You've probably heard of it. It's a zone of intense volcanic and earthquake activity.
Yeah, the Ring of Fire. It always sounds so dramatic.
It is. But there's a reason for that trauma. It's where several of Earth's tectonic plates collide, grinding against each other. That constant friction is what builds up the tension. That releases in earthquakes. And as we've discussed, those underwater quakes are often the trigger for tsunamis.
So it's like living on the edge of a giant slow-motion demolition derby.
That's a great way to put it. The entire Ring of Fire is dotted with active volcanoes and fault lines. So countries along that zone, Japan, Indonesia, Chile, the U.S. West Coast, they're constantly on guard.
And it's not just about the initial earthquake, right? A tsunami can travel thousands of kilometers, hitting coastlines far from where the quake originated.
Exactly. And that's why the science of monitoring and prediction is so vital. We've gotten much better at detecting potential tsunami-generating earthquakes, but there are still huge challenges when it comes to warning systems, especially in less developed regions.
It's a sobering thought, knowing that a massive wave could be racing toward a coastline with very little warning. But on a more hopeful note, your sources make it clear that we're not just sitting ducks. We've learned a lot from past tragedies, and there have been some major steps forward in terms of preparedness.
Absolutely. The 2004 Indian Ocean tsunami was a wake-up call for the world. Before that, there was no coordinated warning system for the entire Indian Ocean basin.
So what changed after 2004?
Well, for one thing, the Indian Ocean Tsunami Warning and Mitigation System was established. It's a network of sensors, buoys, and communication systems that can detect tsunamis early on and relay warnings to coastal communities.
That sounds like a huge undertaking.
It was, and it's still evolving, but it's made a big difference. In 2018, for example, when a volcanic eruption triggered a tsunami near Indonesia, the warning system gave people precious time to evacuate, saving countless lives.
That's encouraging to hear. Are there other examples of how we're getting better at preparing for these events?
Definitely, Japan, which has long and tragic history with tsunamis, has invested heavily in tsunami-resistant infrastructure. They've built massive seawalls, breakwaters, and even elevated roads to try to minimize the impact of these waves.
I've seen pictures of those seawalls. They're absolutely enormous. But I imagine that kind of construction is incredibly expensive.
It is, and it's not a perfect solution. No seawall can withstand every tsunami, but it's one layer of protection. And in some cases, it can buy crucial time for evacuation.
So it's a combination of technology, infrastructure, and good old-fashioned planning.
Precisely. And let's not forget about community education. Public awareness campaigns can be incredibly effective, teaching people about the warning signs of a tsunami, what to do during an evacuation, and how to stay safe after the wave has passed. That knowledge can literally save lives.
It makes you realize that preparedness isn't just about big government projects. It's about individuals taking responsibility for their own safety and the safety of their communities.
Exactly. And the sources you shared
Yeah.
really drive home the point that the impact of a tsunami goes far beyond the initial destruction. We often focus on the immediate aftermath, the loss of life, the damage to buildings. But there's a whole ripple effect that can last for years.
That's a great point. The sources do delve into those long-term consequences. What are some of the less obvious impacts that they highlight?
Well, one of the most significant is the economic devastation. Tsunamis can wipe out entire industries, disrupt supply chains, and leave communities struggling to rebuild their livelihoods. It's not just about repairing physical structures, it's about restoring economic viability.
And it's not just about money, right? There's a huge social and psychological toll as well.
Absolutely. The trauma of experiencing a tsunami can be profound. People lose loved ones, homes, everything they hold dear. Communities can be shattered, and the social fabric can take years to repair.
It's a reminder that the true cost of a tsunami is measured in more than just dollars and cents. It's measured in lives lost, lives disrupted, and the erosion of community resilience.
Exactly. And then there are the health risks. Post-tsunami environments can be incredibly dangerous. Water sources can be contaminated, sanitation systems disrupted, and the spread of disease becomes a major concern.
It's a whole cascade of challenges, each one compounding the others. But amidst all this, it's heartening to see how the global community responds to these disasters. Did your sources highlight any particular examples of post-tsunami aid and recovery efforts?
They did. And it's interesting to see how approaches vary across different regions, reflecting different needs and levels of preparedness. For example, in North America, FEMA plays a central role in coordinating disaster relief, particularly along the Pacific coast. They have a well-established system for providing aid and support to affected communities.
So there's a strong emphasis on immediate response. What about long-term recovery?
That's where community drills and preparedness education come in. There's a growing recognition that the best way to mitigate the impact of future tsunamis is to empower communities to be as self-sufficient as possible.
Makes sense. What about other parts of the world? I know South America has experienced its share of devastating tsunamis.
Yes, countries like Chile, which sits right on the ring of fire, have learned some hard lessons. They've invested heavily in early warning systems and have developed robust disaster management protocols. They've really taken the initiative to prepare for the inevitable.
And what about Asia, which was so tragically affected by the 2004 tsunami?
The 2004 tsunami led to a massive influx of international aid, and countries like Indonesia have made significant strides in improving their disaster management frameworks. There's a much greater emphasis on early warning systems, community education, and evacuation planning. They've really transformed their approach to disaster preparedness.
That's remarkable progress. What about Europe? They don't often come to mind when we think about tsunamis.
Well, the risk in Europe might not be as high as in some other regions. They're certainly not immune. The focus there tends to be on research and advanced monitoring for early detection. Greece, for instance, has implemented community-based preparedness strategies, recognizing that local knowledge and action are crucial in a tsunami event.
It's interesting how each region has its own unique approach, tailored to its specific circumstances. What about Russia? They have a vast coastline along the Pacific, right?
They do, which means they face a significant tsunami risk. Their focus has been on closely monitoring seismic activity and strengthening local emergency response capabilities. It's a vast country with a lot of remote coastline, so the challenges are considerable.
It sounds like there's a global recognition of the threat posed by tsunamis and a growing commitment to preparedness and mitigation. But I'm curious, are there any areas where you think we're still falling short? Where do we need to do better?
That's a great question. I think one of the biggest challenges is ensuring that early warning systems are effective and accessible to everyone, particularly in developing countries. There's still a gap between the technology that's available and the ability of some communities to receive and act on those warnings.
So it's not just about having the technology, it's about making sure it reaches the people who need it most.
Exactly. And then there's the issue of complacency. Even in regions that have experienced tsunamis firsthand, there's a tendency for people to become complacent over time. The memory of the disaster fades, and with it, the sense of urgency about preparedness.
It's human nature, I suppose, but we can't afford to let our guard down.
Absolutely not. Tsunamis are a powerful force of nature, and we need to respect that power. We need to stay vigilant, stay informed, and stay prepared.
Well said. I think that's a crucial message to take away from this deep dive. It's been a fascinating and sobering deep dive, I have to say. The material you sent over was really eye-opening, especially the Understanding Tsunamis PDF. It lays out the science so clearly, and the articles you included added a whole other layer of real-world impact.
Yeah, it's one of those topics that can seem abstract until you delve into the history
Hmm.
and the human stories behind those statistics.
Exactly. And it's not just about the past, right? There's so much being done right now to prepare for future events, from high-tech warning systems to
Mhm.
community education programs. It feels like there's a real global effort underway.
There is. And it's a multifaceted effort. We've talked about the technology and the infrastructure, but one area that really caught my eye in the sources was the role of urban planning.
Oh, that's interesting. So it's not just about surviving a tsunami, it's about designing communities that are less vulnerable in the first place.
Exactly. Think about it. If we know that certain coastal areas are high risk, should we be building right up to the shoreline? Or should we be thinking about setback zones, natural barriers like mangroves, and building codes that prioritize tsunami-resistant construction?
It's like taking a step back and saying, okay, we can't control nature, but we can control how we interact with it.
Exactly. And the sources make a compelling case. For this kind of proactive approach, it's not just about reacting to disasters, it's about anticipating them and designing our communities accordingly.
It sounds like a complex challenge, though, balancing development needs with the need for safety.
It is complex,
Hmm.
but it's also an opportunity to reimagine our relationship with the coast, to build smarter and more resilient communities. And it's not just about governments and big institutions, it's about individuals making informed choices.
So what can the average person do besides,
Yeah.
having an emergency kit and an evacuation plan?
Well, for one thing, get informed. Learn about the tsunami risk in your area. Find out if there are community preparedness programs you can participate in. And if you're thinking about buying property near the coast, factor tsunami risk into your decision-making.
That's great advice. It's empowering to know that we can all play a part in creating safer communities.
Absolutely. Knowledge is power. And when it comes to tsunamis, that knowledge can literally be the difference between life and death.
Well said. I think this deep dive has given us a lot to think about. From the science behind these incredible waves to the global efforts to prepare for them, it's been a fascinating journey.
It has. And it underscores the importance of respecting the power of nature, while also recognizing our own ability to adapt and innovate. We can't prevent tsunamis,
Yeah.
but we can certainly minimize their impact.
Exactly. So to our listener, we hope this deep dive has given you a deeper understanding of tsunamis. And remember, this is just the starting point. There's a whole world of information out there, and we encourage you to keep exploring, keep learning, and most importantly, stay safe.
Well said. Thanks for having me.
And thank you for sharing your expertise. Until next time, keep diving deep.